As the Kings get set for their home opener, we are happy to be joined by the voice of the LA Kings, Nick Nickson, on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, and we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. Worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, the Kings get ready, finally, for their home opener against the San Jose Sharks, and getting ready to call the action is the voice of the LA Kings. He is Nick Nickson, working his 44th season in the Kings broadcast booth. You can see him and hear him along with Jim Fox and Daryl Evans on the FanDuel Sports Network and ESPN 710 app as well. Nick, great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure, Eddie. And good to finally be looking forward to a home game after a grueling preseason and start to the regular season. It was 6 road preseason games and then 7 to start the regular season. So, yeah, it'll be fun to be at Crypto.com Arena for the opener tomorrow night.
Well, you've certainly been a part of many of these home openers. I mentioned 44th season calling games for the Kings, but I know you said right before the season started, you announced that this will be your final season. And we had you on the show last year, and you had mentioned you had a couple more years in you. Didn't know it was going to literally be a couple more years. But obviously, congratulations on a great career. How did you come to the decision, though, that this one would be the last one? Yeah,
well, thank you very much, Eddie. I'm running out of things to say. I mean, which is not good for a broadcaster. I've thought about it for a couple of years now. And before they made changes last year on the TV side, and we went back to a simulcast with me doing the play-by-play, I had thought at the time I'd do one more year, which would have been last year. But when I had the meeting with the Kings people, Luc Robitaille said, "Can you do 2 more? Can you do 2?" All right, I'll do 2 more. And as it turned out, this will be my 50th season of calling pro hockey. I was lucky. I started in the American Hockey League within a year after I graduated from college. I was only 22, and I did the American Hockey League games for 6 seasons, and this will be my 44th season with the Kings. So as it turned out, I wasn't thinking of this when I looked at the timeline, but looking back on it, it'll be 50 years calling pro hockey, which is a nice round number. So I'm good with the decision. I'm ready for it. I will be able to stay busy. I love playing golf. My 2 grandkids play sports. I want to watch them as they get into high school. And we like to travel, my wife and I. So, you get a sense for when it's time to wrap things up and move on. And which is why I said earlier, Eddie, I'm good with this. I'm good with the decision, but I'm looking forward to this final season.
Well, as you know, whether you're a professional athlete or a broadcaster, it's always great to be able to go out on your own terms. So we're happy you're able to do that. You're going, obviously, we talked about a little bit before we started the show, this almost historic road trip for the Kings when you include the preseason. So you're going to be going on, around the NHL, see some friends in different places. Are you treating it differently at all, or is it just kind of business as usual for now?
Yeah, right now, the people on our traveling crew, radio and TV on this last trip, were asking me, how are you feeling? This is the last time you're in Toronto and Boston. And I'm not really too nostalgic about it all yet. Of course, the 5 cities we played to start the season are all East Coast. So we only play them once in their building. So I'm done with Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto. But, my wife and I are both from the Northeast, and we'll get back there. I'm sure we'll be back in Boston, Toronto for future Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. It's early. Maybe if we're talking about this in February and March, I'm waxing poetic and nostalgic. But right now, it's just business as usual, getting ready to do the game, broadcast the game, and just move on and do the next one.
Well, I would ask you what your career highlight was. I'm pretty sure I know. Had to do with you saying something like, after 45 years, the Kings can wear their crown. I played it for you last time. I won't do it again this time, but I've got that ringtone that will go on as long as I'm alive and have a phone. I will hear your voice. I don't know if that creeps you out at all, but I will hear your voice for many years to come, I hope, making that call, because that was an amazing night. As you all know, being on this journey with Kings fans, you'd never know if you're going to have a moment like that until it actually happens. And for it to actually happen still is amazing.
Yeah. And, it almost gets more amazing the more you think about it, right? I mean, we barely got into the playoffs that year. We're the 8th seed, and then we beat the 1st seed, and then the 2nd seed, the 3rd seed. We won 10 games in a row. We're up 3-0 in every series, which had none of that I just mentioned had ever happened before. So, yeah, I mean, for the first Stanley Cup in franchise history, boy, the Kings put on a show, didn't they? I mean, they did stuff that we still talk about. If you're a Kings fan, you still talk about how they did it. No goaltender has come close in the playoffs to doing what Quick did back in 2012 with his goals against, his save percentage. I think we were 16-4 in that year. And so in the 20 games, Quick allowed 2 goals or fewer in 18 of them. I mean, remarkable. I mean, again, we're going back, 12 years ago now, and we're thinking about, and we're just in amazement of what we saw back then. Wonderful time, and just glad to be part of it.
Yeah, and I know some people might raise their eyebrow at this, but even though the first time's always amazing, because you never know if it's going to happen, but I've always thought, for me, 2014 was even better because of the game 7s and then beating the Blackhawks, right? The defending champs on their ice, and then, the double overtime to win it. I mean, that one was just as momentous. And then, of course, the reverse sweep. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. And like 2012, we saw stuff in that playoff year the Kings did that we'd never seen before. 3 straight game 7 wins, all on the road, never done before, hasn't been done since. 7 elimination games? They won all 7, obviously. They were down 3-0 in the first round of San Jose, and were the 4th team, the last team to win a series trailing through. So again, all this magic that they created in 2014, just you pile it on top to 2012, and just, if you're a Kings fan, boy, so many great memories to just, revisit time and time again.
It was almost like they were making up for all the hard times and the tough times that they gave Kings fans with so many thrilling and amazing things that, like you said, we just haven't seen before. Well, if I may say so, on behalf of Kings fans, I just want to say, Nick, thank you so much for all you've given to Kings fans over the years. Done an amazing job taking us on this hockey journey. We really appreciate you, and just thank you for all the great work you've done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, and I've been so fortunate to work with so many great people in the booth and behind the scenes. And of course, I started with the Kings. My partner was Bob Miller, and of course, Hall of Fame broadcaster, who coincidentally, and this is just as it turns out, did 44 years with the Kings, like I'm going to do. Then we moved to radio, got away from the simulcast for years. I had Brian Engblom, who's still doing games, did ESPN games, now does Tampa Bay Lightning broadcast. I worked with Brian, Mike Allison, Cammy Granato for a bit, Darrell Evans. I've worked with Darrell longer than anyone. This is his 26th season that he and I have been associated. And now that I'm doing the TV and the simulcast, I get to work with Jim Fox. So, the talented people that we work with help drive you to be better and push you to do your best. And that's what I'm most thankful for from that group of people, because from day one, I had great partners. And like I said, behind the scenes, the the guys at the controls at the flagship stations, our engineers on site, going back to Monty Bancroft, Steve Thrapp, the late Steve Thrapp, Johnny Traconis, Jake Warner, Jeff Cabot, now our board op at our flagship. So all these people just, they love hockey, and the fact that they could, be part of it and do such a good job made the job easier for me. So that's what I'm most appreciative of.
Well, we're talking like it's over. We're just getting started. We still have the Kings getting their home opener, and we're going to definitely talk more about that here with Nick Nickson here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on Major League Baseball's postseason. The Dodgers are in the World Series against the Yankees. Dodgers are the underdog in Game 1. They're getting a run and a half. The over-under is at 8.5. The Dodgers are a -122 to win it all. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports teams, and go to the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. We are back with Hall of Famer Nick Nickson, the voice of the LA Kings. He'll be doing, of course, both the simulcast on radio and TV all season long. And Nick, people may not know this. I just mentioned the Dodgers in the World Series. You worked for the Dodgers for many years as their public address announcer, including the 1988 World Series run. The Dodgers and Kings always seem to have a good relationship. I know Dieter Ruhl, the musical director for the Kings and organist, also doing it for the Dodgers as well. You still keep up with the Dodgers these days?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very much so. I did the public address for most of the decade of the 80s. I think my last season was 1989. I took over for the legendary John Ramsey, who I believe was the first PA voice when the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn. So I did that for 8-9 seasons, and the World Series. And I still have a replica trophy up on my shelf here with a couple of the Stanley Cups. So yeah, I follow the Dodgers. My kids both played ball here in Southern California. My grandson has just started in high school, and he plays baseball, and we watch the Dodger games. We go to a few games every year. I will say this, though, I'm kind of torn this year because I grew up in upstate New York. Mickey Mantle was my guy, and I was a diehard Yankee fan. So I guess what I will say, okay, first team to 4, congratulations. I can't lose because my favorite team in the NL, favorite team in the AL are going at it. But, it's I think it's great for the fans because you see the obvious MVPs in both leagues here, right? Going head to head, and Ohtani and Aaron Judge. So a lot of storylines to be had. But yeah, I follow baseball. Baseball and hockey were my two loves as a kid. I played them. In the winter we had the frozen ponds back east, so we did that. We skated, and then we played a lot of baseball in the summer. So yeah, I'm going to be watching a lot of it as long as the Kings aren't playing that night.
Well, the Kings are playing in their home opener against the San Jose Sharks coming up. We talked about the long road trip because of the renovations to Crypto.com Arena. So it's been an interesting 7 games to start. We've seen a little bit of everything, some good, some not so good, and a crazy game in Ottawa as well. Just your thoughts on what has been an interesting start to the season for the Kings.
Yeah, well, a lot of changes. And we'll start with the head coach, Jim Hiller, who took over late in the season, around February, I believe, right around the bye week from Todd McClellan. So he goes into this season, and this is his team now. He's had the whole summer to prepare, decide what systems you want to use. So there is an adjustment period. So that's number one. The other thing, and we mentioned this, Eddie, on opening night, the 4 lines that started this season are all new. They weren't together last year. With the injury to Drew Doughty to start the season, the 3 sets of defensemen, the 3 pairs, are all new. The goaltender acquired in the offseason, Darcy Kemper, was not with the team last year. So again, an adjustment period there, trying to figure out the chemistry, who works well with who. It looks like Kopitar will be with Kempe again, and then they'll try the third member. Deneau and Moore seem to be a good fit, and then Quinton Byfield started at center, has moved to wing recently for various reasons. But so changes there, and then you start on the road. You play some good teams, some not so good teams. Your play is up and down. I think the one thing I will say, Eddie, after 7 games, and maybe it's not fair or it's too early, but I'll say it anyway. I think we don't realize how valuable Drew Doughty has been to this hockey club. He's led the team in ice time every year he's been in the league. And that was even as an 18-year-old. I mean, leading his team in ice time. You don't play that much unless you earn to play that much. And obviously, he's a Hall of Fame defenseman. His ability to play in every situation, power play, he's quarterbacked the number 1 power play from the blue line for years. He kills penalties. He's matched up against the other team's best players night after night. If you're trying to protect a 1-goal lead with 3 minutes left, he'll play the final 3 minutes of the game. Drew is not in there. So I think that's a void that other people are trying to figure out, how can we fill it, right? How can we fill it? Early on, I like the play of Gavrikov. He seems to be the one player, he's got the experience, seems to be the one player that Jim Hiller has been leaning on to play those extra minutes. Although he doesn't play on the power play, but he's played a ton on the penalty kill. So new coach, new lines, the injury to Doughty, all that, it's still a work in progress. And I will say this, at the start of the road trip when the regular season began, Eddie, a lot of us said, okay, we got 5 games on the East Coast. We're going to go home. We're going to play Anaheim. Then we're going to go to Vegas. 3-2-2. We'll take that, won't we? And that's exactly what our record is, 3-2-2, 7 road games. So not, with all the question marks, I guess it's really as good a start as you could expect.
Obviously, every team to start a new season is looking to either establish an identity that they've had or create one. You talked about Jim Hiller taking over. What are some of the things you're seeing that has been different from years past now that Jim Hiller has had a full training camp and been able to try to implement his own ideas?
Yeah, well, they've gone away from the 1-3-1 system, which a lot of people that covered hockey, especially in Edmonton in the playoffs, loathed because it's more of a defensive scheme. And, it worked. Over the years, it's worked for the Kings, so why get rid of it? But with the new look behind the bench with Jim Hiller, I think they wanted to kind of open things up, get the forwards moving a bit more, trying to create more offense, because this is a league where you have to score more compared to 15 years ago to make the playoffs. Playoffs come, then you can shut it down a bit. But so many teams are scoring 3.5 goals a night. Unless you get to that threshold, you're not going to make the playoffs anymore. Used to be the best defensive teams made it, even though they might not have scored a lot. But that's not the case anymore. It's tough to hold on to a 2 and 3 goal lead because teams go at you. They never put the brakes on. They keep going. They keep surging. So, yeah, that's something I've noticed that they're trying to do, getting more flow into the offense for the forwards, and we'll see if it results in success as we move on.
Obviously, new coach, some new players, a new system. We talk about it being early. In your experience, having seen these types of things before, what do you think about the time is where we can say, okay, it's not early anymore? Is it a month into the season? Is it around December? When do you think is a fair amount of time to say, okay, these guys have been together long enough. They know what they're supposed to do. Yeah. Now this is a fair assessment of what this team is and how they're doing.
Well, it's interesting. You look at it 2 ways, Eddie. One is that the unwritten rule in hockey is wherever you are on Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, end of November, it's pretty much where you're going to finish the season. I mean, they've done the studies over the years. So if you're in a playoff position on Thanksgiving, you have a real good chance you're going to be in the playoffs in April. So that comes into play, and then that really stands. I mean, we track it with the Kings, and if you're 8 points out December 1st, Thanksgiving, you usually don't make the playoffs. If you're 10 points up, you do make the playoffs. So that is kind of a timeline that a lot of people follow. But with this team, with the injury to Doughty, with so many new people, I think you hope that as the season progresses, they develop better chemistry with each other. They find out which lines are matched up well with each other. Same with the defensive pairs. So that may be a work in progress until, the second half of the season. Now we're talking January, maybe game 50, game 55. So there's really two ways to look at it, given the situation where the Kings were in at the start of the season.
We've got a little bit more with the voice of the Kings, Nick Nickson, here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, those of us here in Southern California, we are so lucky to be able to see so many live events like the Kings home opener against the Sharks. We've got college football going on, the NFL, NBA, but not just about sports. We've got theater events, comedy shows, and concerts. But no matter what you enjoy, you need to do what I do, and that's use Gametime for all your ticket needs. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff, so you only see incredible deals on great seats, and you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is easy and exciting to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go to PrizePicks app, make your picks, and you could be a winner, and you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we are back with Nick Nickson, who will be on the call, of course, for the Kings home opener against the San Jose Sharks and for the LA Kings, of course, all season long. Nick, you've seen a lot of great players come and go. Anze Kopitar still doing it at a high level in his 19th season. Natural hat trick on opening night. I just wanted to get your thoughts on seeing Anze Kopitar's career to this point and him as one of the all-time great LA Kings.
Yeah, I think it was 2 seasons ago, longtime LA Times reporter Helene Elliott asked a number of us to rank the top 10 Kings in franchise history. I put Anze Kopitar at the top. I think he is the best King of all time, was on the 2 Stanley Cup championship teams, of course. Both years in the playoffs, 2012, 2014, he led the league in playoff scoring. We all know well, we're all well tuned with his defensive prowess. And I think his overall game, sacrificing what could be a lot more offense in his career for the better of the team, makes him my pick. It's interesting because last year I kind of kept track of how many Hall of Famers he was passing on the all-time scoring list. He passed 7 of them last season. He's already passed 3 this year. Jeremy Roenick will be inducted in a couple of weeks. Larry Murphy, longtime NHL defenseman, and John Beliveau. He is 45th all-time in scoring. And there have been, over 7,000 players in the NHL? And he's going to play this year. He's going to play next year. He's going to be a 20-year NHL player. And he's probably going to be in the top 30, 35 scorers of all time. And if you made a list of the best all-around centers that scored, played in the power play, played in the penalty kill, were shutdown players up against the other team's best and played well the 200 feet of the ice, Kopitar would be among the top 5 or 8. You put everything he's accomplished in his career together, and that's why he gets my vote as the Kings' best player of all time.
Talked a little,
and it's too bad, Eddie, that it's not too bad for us. We get to see him all the time here on the West Coast. But people, I've talked to people over the years, they just wish they could see Kopitar more often. They can't because our games aren't on until 10:30, 11 o'clock back east. And people don't stay. I mean, I get that. But that's where he gets shortchanged as far as where he stacks up. Like, prime example would be the Selke Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
Patrice Bergeron retired 2 years ago now. And every year he would be nominated as one of the 3 finalists. For a long time, Kopitar was one of the finalists. I think Patrice won 4 or 5. Kopitar won it twice, was a finalist 2 or 3 other times. I guarantee if Bergeron played out west and Kopitar back east, that trophy would have been flopped as far as how many times they won it. That's the way it goes. I mean, I've said for years, and Eddie, you can appreciate this. You've been a Kings fan for a long time, but no cable, no ESPN, no network coverage of hockey when Marcel Dion played in LA. Can you imagine the notoriety he would get if he was playing today? Because he's one of a handful of players that scored 700 goals, but he's hardly ever in the conversation because people didn't see the greatness of him year after year after year because he was on the West Coast, where the only team west of St. Louis for years was LA and Vancouver. So, yeah,
no doubt. It's a great point, and you're absolutely right on the money. But we have appreciated Andrei Kopitar, obviously in LA, and he's had such a great career. It's and we still get a little more of him, so it's not quite over yet. But it's great. Before I let you go, Nick, I did want to ask you. We talk about a guy like Kopitar. We mentioned Drew Doughty. But it's always exciting to see the young new blood and a couple of guys. We know Quentin Byfield and Brant Clark, high expectations, and we think they're going to be great. But how about Alex Laferriere and Alex Turcotte this season? It's been so fun to see them play so well early on.
Yeah, and, the guy that I think is going to be a real solid NHL player is Alex Laferriere. He's got size. He's a good skater. He seems to understand the game well, with and without the puck. He's got a great shot. Started the year with Kopitar and Kempe, and now he's moved down and playing with Turcotte because Turcotte's deserved and earned more ice time, and he's kind of flopped with Byfield on those 2 lines. But I think Laferriere is going to be one of those players that you can count on in a lot of different situations. I see him down the road killing penalties. He started the year on the first power play unit because he's a right shot, and last year the Kings didn't have hardly any right shot forwards to put out there in the first unit, and he's taking advantage of it. Alex Turcotte, all he has to do is stay healthy, because you can tell, like Laferriere, he understands the game, he sees it. And a comment I made, I think, the other night when we were in Montreal to Jim Fox after the game was Turcotte now he's getting it. Because instead of rushing a play, he's waiting for the play to develop, and then he's making the pass at the right time. I think that's poise, that's experience, that's confidence. He's showing that right now, which is why Coach Jim Hiller has bumped him up as the 3rd-line center. He's on the second power play unit too lately. So those are 2 players that, the future bodes well for the Kings, because if Turcotte can continue to do what we think he can do, I'm confident Laferriere is going to be a top 9 forward, and Turcotte should be. So there are 2 big pieces moving forward for the next 8, 9, 10 years.
That is Hall of Famer Nick Nickson. You can see him and hear him on Kings broadcasts all season long on the FanDuel Sports Network and ESPN 710 app. Nick, looking forward to seeing you out of Crypto.com Arena, and looking forward to hearing you and Jim and Daryl on the broadcast all season long. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. And once again, thanks for all you've done for Kings fans and giving us some of your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Anytime, my pleasure. And thanks for being a Kings fan.
Thank you. That is Nick Nickson, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and we really appreciate his time. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Friday's show, obviously we'll recap the Kings home opener and have our Kings fan feedback show as well. If you want to get in on that, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. And stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings go.